A veteran and his dog rebuilt a burned mansion. What they found will move you to tears. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's dive into the story. It all started with a tragedy, a house consumed by flames, and a man who had lost everything. Grant Mercer, a 42-year-old Army veteran, had seen his fair share of battles in life. But none of those had prepared him for the devastation that had recently struck. After a string of bad luck, including losing his job and struggling with his mental health, he found himself living in his old, beaten-up truck, a place he called home for the time being. His only companion was Scout, his loyal German shepherd, who had stood by his side during countless tours overseas and now through the darkest times of his life. One cold winter morning, as Grant drove through a small rural town, he noticed an old mansion sitting at the edge of a hill. It was a sad sight, half-collapsed, charred from a fire that had ravaged the structure years ago. The place was forgotten by most, left to decay with only the faint memory of its past grandeur lingering in the air. But to Grant, something about it felt like a challenge, a test of his will to rebuild. Maybe it was the memories of the battles he had fought, the victories and losses, or maybe it was just the need for something to hold on to. His heart told him to stop. Pulling up in front of the mansion, Grant climbed out of his truck, his boots crunching in the fresh snow as Scout jumped out beside him. The house seemed almost alive, as if it were calling out to him. It wasn't just the decaying walls or the overgrown ivy that intrigued him, but something deeper. Scout barked and ran ahead, sniffing around the front porch, and Grant felt a rush of emotion he hadn't expected. Maybe this was his chance to turn things around. This burned mansion, once full of life and history, could now be the very thing that saved him. He began to wonder about the stories the house held, the people who once lived there, and what had happened to the place after the fire. Grant spent the next few hours walking around the property, exploring its broken rooms and fallen beams. It wasn't just a house, it was a symbol of what had been destroyed and what could still be rebuilt. He didn't know how he would do it or where the money would come from. But one thing was certain. This house could be his second chance, and he wasn't going to let it slip away. Grant had always been the type to take things one step at a time, but something about this mansion called to him. He had no grand plan in mind, no immediate vision of how he could restore this place to its former glory, but in his heart, he felt the pull of possibility. The old mansion, though scarred by fire, still held something valuable, the very thing that had always eluded him in his life: hope. Hope for something greater than the weight of his past struggles. As he walked around the grounds, Scout trotting alongside him, Grant couldn't help but feel the odd connection to the place. The mansion, even in its ruined state, spoke to him, its empty windows like eyes staring back at him, challenging him to rebuild it. The cold wind whipped around them, but it didn't matter. Grant had fought in much harsher conditions, and this was nothing compared to the challenges he had faced before. Yet, even with the snow falling softly around him and the eerie silence of the broken building, something deep inside told him that this place was going to be the key to his redemption. He spent the next few days coming back to the mansion, clearing debris, and getting a better sense of the layout. The mansion was massive, far bigger than anything he had ever imagined. Rooms full of soot and ashes, burnt furniture still strewn across the floors. But there was something else too, a hidden potential in the bones of this place. It was more than just a house. It was a home waiting to be restored. One afternoon, while Grant was carefully moving a pile of broken beams, he discovered something buried beneath the rubble, a small, weathered chest. His heart skipped a beat. With trembling hands, he pulled the chest free and opened it. Inside, wrapped in a piece of old cloth, was an assortment of items: a gold pocket watch, a family photograph, and a small, handwritten letter. The letter, faded and brittle with age, was addressed to someone named Thomas Mercer. The name struck a chord with Grant. His last name. Could this be some distant relative of his, perhaps? Someone who had lived in the mansion long before it was consumed by flames? Grant was consumed with curiosity. He carefully read the letter, which spoke of a man's love for his family, the house, and a promise to protect it. It also spoke of an inheritance, a legacy that had been passed down through generations. This discovery was the first spark of hope Grant had felt in a long time. But as he read on, the letter seemed to hint at something more, a secret buried deep within the house, a treasure that was meant to be passed on to the rightful heir. Grant's heart raced. Was it possible? Could this mansion, in all its ruin, hold the key to his future? He had come to the mansion looking for a place to rebuild his life, but now, it seemed, his journey might hold even more significance. He knew he had to uncover the rest of the story. Over the next few weeks, Grant spent every waking hour restoring the mansion. Scout stayed by his side, always alert and loyal, never leaving Grant's side. As the snow began to melt, Grant's work started to show results. The walls that once seemed like nothing more than charred remnants began to take shape, and he could see the bones of the mansion coming back to life. Yet, despite his hard work, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to the mansion than just a house. There was a deeper purpose, a hidden treasure he had yet to find. Late one night, as Grant was working on the top floor, he heard something strange, a soft creaking sound, as if the house itself was sighing. He paused, trying to make sense of it, but the sound came again, louder this time. Scout's ears pricked up, and the dog began to growl softly, walking cautiously toward a corner of the room. Grant felt a chill run down his spine. Could this be the sign he had been waiting for? A sign that the mansion's secret was about to reveal itself? Without thinking, Grant moved toward the corner where Scout was standing, and as he knelt down to inspect, he found a hidden panel in the floor. His heart raced as he pried it open, revealing a small, darkened space beneath. What he found inside would change everything. As Grant opened the hidden panel in the floor, his heart raced. The space beneath was narrow and dark, but something inside it seemed to beckon him. The faint smell of old wood and dust filled his nostrils as he lowered himself into the dark cavity, with Scout right behind him, his faithful companion. The dog's low growl filled the silence, as if sensing something Grant couldn't yet see. He pulled his flashlight from his pocket and shone the beam into the small area. At first, it appeared to be nothing more than a dusty and used storage space. But as his light flickered across the floorboards, something caught his eye. It was an old chest, covered in cobwebs and nearly hidden by a pile of forgotten rubble. Grant's hands trembled with anticipation as he approached it. He had no idea what he was about to uncover, but everything about this moment felt significant. Carefully, he cleared away the debris, his flashlight illuminating the worn surface of the chest. It was locked, but the heavy padlock had rusted over time, making it easier to break. With one swift motion, Grant smashed it open with a nearby metal tool. The lid creaked as it slowly lifted, revealing its contents. Inside, Grant found a bundle of yellowed papers, old photographs, and a few small, but well-preserved trinkets. His breath caught in his throat as he began to sift through the items, each one telling a story of the mansion's past. The first photograph he picked up was of a man and a woman, standing proudly in front of the very mansion Grant was working to restore. The man had a stern face, but his eyes held a kindness that was hard to ignore. The woman beside him was smiling, her face glowing with happiness. They looked like the kind of people who had built something beautiful together. The caption on the back read, "Thomas and Eleanor Mercer, the legacy of this house." The name Thomas Mercer struck a chord with Grant once again. Could this be the same Thomas Mercer from the letter he had found earlier? The very same man who had once lived in the house and had left behind a legacy? The realization hit him hard. This wasn't just some old mansion. It was his family's mansion, a place he never knew existed. His heart swelled with emotion as he carefully set the photograph aside and moved on to the next item in the chest. It was a set of documents, brittle and fading with age, but still legible enough for Grant to make out the writing. These papers, he realized, were deeds and legal records, evidence of ownership that stretched back generations. As he read through them, the weight of what he was holding became clear. This mansion, this land, was part of his heritage, something his ancestors had built and fought for. But there was more. Hidden among the papers was a will, signed by Thomas Mercer himself. The will detailed how the mansion was to be passed down through the generations, with the final clause stating that if the house ever fell into ruin, The inheritance would go to the closest living relative who could restore it. Grant's heart skipped a beat. The words on the page seemed to come alive, as if the house itself had been waiting for him to find it. It was more than just an inheritance. It was a challenge, a call to action. The mansion wasn't just a property. It was a legacy, a family treasure that Grant had never known existed. But now, it seemed as though fate had led him here to reclaim it. But the discovery didn't end there. As Grant continued to examine the chest, he found something that would change everything. At the very bottom of the chest, tucked away in a corner, was a small key. It was old, but intricately designed, with a silver sheen that gleamed faintly in the light of his flashlight. The key seemed to call to him, as if it held the answer to everything he had been wondering about. What could it open? What was hidden in the mansion that he had yet to discover? Grant stood up, clutching the key in his hand. His mind raced with possibilities. The mansion was filled with secrets, and it was clear now that it was more than just a house to be rebuilt. It was a puzzle, a mystery that had been waiting for someone like him to solve it. With Scout by his side, Grant made a silent vow to uncover the full extent of the mansion's secrets, to restore not only the house but the legacy that had been passed down to him. Little did he know, this key was the first step on a journey that would change his life forever. He had no idea what lay ahead, but one thing was certain. This mansion, this place he had fought so hard to bring back to life, held more than just the potential for a new beginning. It held the power to heal the deepest wounds of his past. The next morning, Grant woke up to the sound of Scout's paws clicking across the floor. The dog was already by the door, eager to continue their work. Grant stretched and yawned, his muscles sore from days of labor, but he knew that today would be different. Today, he had something new to discover, the key he had found in the hidden chest. His mind raced with possibilities. What could it unlock? Where would it lead him? There was something about this key, something that told him it wasn't just an ordinary key. It had been waiting for him, as though it had been placed in that chest all those years ago for a reason. Grant slipped the key into his pocket and headed downstairs, where the mansion seemed to greet him with an eerie calm. He looked around at the progress he had made over the past weeks. The walls that had once been burnt black now stood firm, painted fresh and white. The rooms that had been filled with ash were now empty canvases, waiting to be brought back to life. But even as the house began to take shape, something still felt incomplete. It wasn't just about the restoration. It was about uncovering the truth that had been buried for so long. With Scout following closely behind, Grant made his way back to the main floor and approached the hidden panel once again. The key burned a hole in his pocket, urging him to find what it was meant for. He scanned the room. Then his eyes landed on the large, ornate grandfather clock that stood tall in the corner. It had been there when he first arrived at the mansion, its time frozen, much like the house itself. Something about the clock seemed odd. It had been the first thing he noticed when he walked into the room, and yet, it had never crossed his mind to open it up. Now, with the key in hand, Grant felt that familiar pull, the feeling that something important was hidden inside. He approached the clock and examined it closely. The wood was old, weathered by time, but sturdy. There was a small keyhole on the side, almost hidden from view. His pulse quickened as he inserted the key. The moment it clicked, the clock's face creaked and began to move. Slowly, the wooden panel on the side of the clock opened, revealing a narrow passageway hidden in the wall. Grant's heart skipped a beat. He had expected the key to open a drawer or a simple compartment, but this was something far more extraordinary. A hidden doorway? What could this lead to? Without hesitation, he stepped forward, pushing the panel fully open. Scout, ever watchful, stood by his side, his eyes trained on the darkness ahead. Grant hesitated for a moment before stepping into the passageway. The air was thick with dust and the scent of old wood, but the path was clear. He made his way down the narrow corridor, the walls cool to the touch, his footsteps echoing in the silence. It was a strange feeling, walking through the dark passage, as if he were uncovering something that had been lost to time. The passage seemed to stretch on forever, but after what felt like an eternity, the tunnel opened up into a small room. The air was warmer here, as if the space had been sealed off from the rest of the mansion for years. Grant's eyes adjusted to the dim light, and he could just make out the shapes of old furniture covered in sheets, some of it still intact, others decaying. But it wasn't the furniture that caught his attention. It was the large, wooden chest in the corner of the room, its surface etched with intricate designs, as though it had been made with great care and craftsmanship. He approached the chest slowly, his heart racing. What could it possibly contain? He reached out and slowly lifted the lid, his hands shaking with anticipation. Inside, he found more than he had ever expected. There were stacks of old letters, neatly arranged, some of them tied together with faded ribbons. There were also journals, handwritten accounts of what seemed like generations of Mercer ancestors. As Grant sifted through the papers, one letter caught his eye. It was dated from decades ago, written by Thomas Mercer himself. The letter spoke of a great secret, one that had been passed down through the family for years. It mentioned a hidden treasure, not of gold or silver, but something far more valuable. The treasure was knowledge, the wisdom of the Mercer family, and their legacy. The letter hinted that the treasure would reveal itself only to the one who was truly worthy, someone who could understand the depth of the family's history and restore what had been lost. As Grant read the letter, he felt a surge of emotion. This was it. The mansion, the legacy, the key. It had all led him to this moment. He was the one who had been chosen, the one who could restore the Mercer name and bring honor to the family once again. The realization was overwhelming, but it also filled him with a sense of purpose he had never felt before. The mansion was no longer just a place to fix. It was a journey, a path that would guide him to discover not only the secrets of his ancestors, but the man he was meant to become. Grant stood still, holding the letter in his hand, his mind racing. The words on the page seemed to glow with an almost magical intensity, as if they had been waiting for him to read them for decades. The Mercer family legacy, a secret hidden in plain sight, had finally revealed itself. He now understood the true meaning of the mansion and the journey he had embarked upon. The treasure was not some material wealth, but a deeper, more profound inheritance. The wisdom, the history, and the responsibility to restore what had been lost. The more he read, the more he realized that this mansion wasn't just about rebuilding its physical structure. It was about restoring a family's name, their legacy, and ensuring that the knowledge of those who had come before him would live on. The letters, journals, and photographs he had uncovered over the past few weeks were pieces of a much larger puzzle, one that Grant could not ignore. The weight of his discovery was heavy, but it also gave him a sense of purpose he had been missing for so long. The mansion, this grand, decaying house that had once been the pride of the Mercer family, now seemed alive with possibility. But there was more. The letter mentioned a hidden chamber beneath the house, a place where the true heart of the Mercer family treasure lay waiting. It spoke of an ancient artifact, a key to unlocking the family's full potential, a symbol of their power and influence. The artifact had been hidden away to protect it from enemies who sought to destroy the Mercer name. According to the letter, only a descendant of the Mercer family, someone with the right heart and the right intentions, could uncover the artifact and unlock its power. Grant knew this was no coincidence. He had been led here for a reason, and now he understood that the mansion was more than just a place to live. It was a battleground for the Mercer family's legacy. He had to finish what had been started so many years ago. With a sense of urgency, Grant began to make plans. He had spent weeks restoring the house, but now he needed to take it a step further. The hidden chamber was the key to everything, and he was determined to find it. Scout was already by his side, his loyal companion, sensing the change in the air. Grant knew he couldn't do this alone. He would need help, and there was one person who could guide him. The elderly man he had met weeks ago, the one who seemed to know more about the mansion's history than anyone else. The old man had spoken of family secrets, of the Mercer legacy, but had never fully explained what he knew. Grant felt it was time to pay him another visit. He gathered his tools, grabbed the key from his pocket, and set out for the small cottage at the edge of town where the old man lived. The drive was quiet, and Grant's mind raced with thoughts of what he might find. Was the old man still there? Would he be able to help him uncover the final pieces of the puzzle? When Grant arrived at the cottage, the door creaked open, and the old man appeared. His face was weathered, his eyes sharp, and there was a knowing look in his gaze, as if he had been expecting Grant all along. "I knew you would come," the old man said, his voice low and steady. "You found the letter, haven't you?" Grant nodded, holding up the letter he had discovered in the hidden chest. "I need your help," Grant said, his voice filled with determination. The old man studied him for a moment before nodding slowly. "I thought it would be you," he said. "The Mercer blood runs deep in your veins. You are the one destined to restore this house, to reclaim what was lost." He paused, his eyes gleaming with something Grant couldn't quite place. "But be warned. The path ahead is not an easy one. There are forces at work here that you cannot yet understand. This house, this legacy, it is both a blessing and a curse. The artifact you seek has the power to change everything, but it will also demand a price." Grant felt a chill run down his spine. He had already lost so much, but he wasn't about to back down now. He had come this far, and he was ready to see it through. "I'll do whatever it takes," he said, his voice resolute. The old man nodded, as if he had been waiting for Grant to say those words. "Then follow me," he said, turning and leading Grant down a narrow path behind the cottage. The path was overgrown with vines, and the air grew cooler as they walked deeper into the woods. Finally, they came to a small clearing, and the old man stopped in front of a large stone. "This is it," the old man said, pointing to the stone. "The entrance to the hidden chamber. Only those with the Mercer bloodline can open it." Grant stepped forward, the key burning a hole in his pocket. He knew this was the moment. With his heart pounding in his chest, he inserted the key into a small crevice in the stone, and with a deep rumble, the stone shifted. The ground beneath him trembled, and as the stone moved aside, a dark, narrow staircase appeared, leading down into the depths of the earth. This was it, the beginning of the end. The chamber, the artifact, everything Grant had been searching for, was waiting just below the surface. Grant took a deep breath as he stood at the entrance of the narrow staircase, the key still clutched tightly in his hand. The old man, who had been guiding him, stood behind him, his face as unreadable as ever. The air felt cooler as the stone shifted, opening the hidden passageway beneath the earth. This was the moment Grant had been waiting for, the culmination of everything he had discovered about his family's history, the mansion's secrets, and the legacy that he had unknowingly inherited. With Scout by his side, Grant stepped into the darkness, the faint light from his flashlight illuminating the steps below. The air was thick with dust and the scent of old stone, but there was something else, a strange energy that seemed to pulse through the earth itself. As he descended into the depths, the sound of his footsteps echoed off the stone walls, the silence of the mansion above replaced by an eerie quiet. The staircase wound down for what felt like an eternity, but finally, Grant reached the bottom. The passage opened up into a vast, dimly lit chamber. The walls were lined with old, forgotten relics, paintings, sculptures, and artifacts that seemed to tell the story of a family that had once been powerful, influential, and respected. But the most striking feature of the room was the center of the chamber. In the middle, on a pedestal of stone, lay a large, ornate chest, its surface covered in intricate carvings. It looked ancient, almost otherworldly. Grant could feel the weight of its presence, the sense that it held something far greater than he could even imagine. He took another step forward, and as he did, Scout let out a low growl, his eyes fixed on the chest. Grant reached out, his hand trembling, but before he could touch the chest, the old man's voice echoed through the chamber. "Be careful," he warned, his voice sharp and full of caution. "That chest holds more than you realize. It is the key to everything, but it will also test you. Only the one who is truly worthy can open it." Grant paused, his hand hovering just above the chest. He had come this far, and the words of the old man, though unsettling, only made him more determined. "I'm ready," Grant said, his voice firm and resolute. The old man nodded, stepping back into the shadows. Grant turned his attention back to the chest. He could feel the weight of the Mercer family legacy pressing down on him. But it wasn't just about the mansion anymore. It wasn't just about restoring a house or uncovering a long-lost treasure. It was about something deeper, something that had been passed down through the generations, hidden away until the right person came along to uncover it. Grant reached out and placed his hand on the chest. The moment his fingers made contact, a low hum filled the air, and the chest began to glow with an ethereal light. Grant's heart raced as the carvings on the chest seemed to come to life, shifting and moving in a pattern that he couldn't quite understand. The glow intensified, and suddenly, the lid of the chest creaked open, revealing its contents. Inside was not gold or jewels, but a small, delicate box, crafted from the finest wood and engraved with symbols that Grant didn't recognize. His breath caught in his throat as he carefully lifted the box from its resting place. The moment it touched his hands, a sense of calm washed over him, as though the weight of the world had been lifted from his shoulders. The box was warm to the touch, as if it had been waiting for him to find it. Grant carefully opened the box, and inside, there was a single, small key. It was made of a metal that seemed to shimmer with a light of its own, and Grant knew, deep down, that this was the key he had been searching for. It was the artifact mentioned in the letter, the one that could unlock the true power of the Mercer legacy. But as Grant held the key, something unexpected happened. A voice, soft but clear, echoed in his mind. "You have found it," the voice said. "But now, you must choose. The key will unlock the door to a new future, but it will also change everything. Are you ready to accept the responsibility?" Grant's heart pounded in his chest as the weight of the voice's words sank in. This was no ordinary key. It wasn't just a symbol of wealth or power. It was a key to a future that was both uncertain and full of promise. The choice was his. The future of the Mercer family, the mansion, and everything he had worked for was in his hands. The room seemed to grow darker as Grant stood there, staring at the key, his mind racing. He could feel the pull of the legacy, the desire to restore his family's name, to bring honor to the mansion and the land that had been abandoned for so long. But he also felt the weight of the decision, the knowledge that once he used the key, there would be no turning back. He closed his eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and made his choice. He would accept the responsibility. He would use the key to unlock the future that awaited him, no matter the cost. The room seemed to come alive with energy as Grant stepped forward, holding the key in his hand. As he did, the walls of the chamber began to shift, revealing a hidden door that Grant hadn't seen before. The key was the answer, the final piece of the puzzle. With a steady hand, he inserted the key into the door's lock, and with a final turn, the door creaked open, revealing what lay beyond. The future was now in his grasp. Grant stood at the threshold of the door, the key still in his hand. The moment it turned and the door creaked open, the air around him seemed to shift. It was as if a veil had been lifted, revealing something ancient and long forgotten. The room beyond was bathed in an otherworldly glow, the kind of light that felt both warm and unsettling. The walls were lined with shelves, filled with scrolls, books, and artifacts, each one telling a story of the Mercer family's past, their triumphs and their losses. But it wasn't the shelves that caught his attention. At the center of the room, on a pedestal made of stone, sat a large, ornate book. The book was bound in leather, its cover embossed with intricate designs that seemed to move in the dim light. It was as if the book was alive, waiting to be opened. Grant approached the pedestal slowly, his heart racing. The book called to him, its presence almost hypnotic. As he reached out to touch it, a wave of emotion washed over him. This was it, the heart of the Mercer family's legacy, the knowledge and wisdom of generations. He knew that this book held the answers he had been searching for, but he also knew that opening it would change everything. With a steady breath, Grant opened the book. The pages were old, yellowed with age, but they were still legible. As he turned the first page, the words seemed to jump off the page, filling his mind with visions of the past. He saw the Mercer family, their rise to power, and their eventual fall. The book told the story of their struggles, their victories, and the curse that had been placed upon them. It spoke of betrayal, of family secrets hidden in the shadows, and of a treasure that had been lost to time. The words on the page felt familiar, yet foreign, as if they were speaking directly to him. As Grant read, he began to understand the full weight of the responsibility that had been placed upon him. The Mercer family had been blessed with great power and wealth, but it had come at a price. The treasure they had guarded so fiercely was not gold or jewels, but knowledge, the kind of knowledge that could change the world. But with that knowledge came a curse, a warning that the power could easily corrupt those who were not worthy. Grant had always felt like he had been given a second chance in life, but now he understood that this second chance was not just for him. It was for the Mercer family, for their legacy, and for the future. He had been chosen to restore the family's name, to unlock the secrets that had been buried for so long. But he also knew that the task ahead would not be easy. The power contained in the book could be used for great good or terrible evil. It was up to him to decide how to use it. As Grant closed the book, he felt a weight settle on his shoulders. He had uncovered the Mercer family's history, but now he had to face the future. The mansion, the legacy, and the treasure were all part of something much larger than he had ever imagined. It was a battle between light and darkness, between the past and the future. But Grant was ready. He had already faced his demons and come out stronger on the other side. Now, it was time to restore the Mercer name, to reclaim the power that had been lost, and to ensure that the legacy of his ancestors lived on. As he stood in the glowing room, the echoes of the past seemed to fade away, leaving only the present. The mansion was no longer just a house to be rebuilt. It was a symbol of hope, of redemption, and of the future. Grant knew that the journey ahead would not be easy, but he was no longer afraid. With Scout by his side, he stepped forward, ready to face whatever came next. The future was his to shape, and he would do it in honor of the Mercer family, their legacy, and the knowledge that had been passed down through the generations. As Grant stood in the chamber, the weight of the book's revelations pressing heavily on him, the quiet hum of the mansion seemed to surround him. The pages of the ancient tome had laid bare the truth. The Mercer legacy, with all its grandeur and sorrow, was now his responsibility. The mansion, the treasure, and the power contained within the knowledge he had just uncovered were all in his hands. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that this wasn't just about restoring a house or a family name. This was about facing the future with the wisdom of the past. Grant felt a strange connection to the generations that had come before him, as if their struggles, their triumphs, and their failures had led him to this very moment. But with that realization came the daunting truth. Restoring the Mercer name wasn't just about rebuilding a house. It was about confronting a darkness that had haunted the family for generations. The curse that had been passed down, the power that had corrupted the family once before, was not something to be taken lightly. The mansion had been abandoned for a reason, and Grant had to be sure that he was ready for what came next. With Scout by his side, he made his way back up the stairs, the echo of his footsteps like a reminder that his journey was far from over. As he exited the hidden chamber, the weight of the key in his pocket felt heavier than before. It was a symbol of his heritage, yes, but it was also a reminder of the choice he had made, to embrace his family's legacy, for better or for worse. Grant stood for a moment in the doorway, gazing out over the mansion that had now become his to restore. The house, though damaged and worn, was still standing. It had withstood the test of time and fire, and now it was waiting for him to give it new life. But more than that, it was waiting for him to decide what kind of man he would be. He could rebuild the house and unlock the family's hidden power, but what would that power mean if he couldn't control it? He thought about the lessons he had learned in his time as a soldier, about the responsibility that came with power and the choices that defined a man's life. The Mercers had fallen because they had lost sight of that balance. They had let greed and ambition cloud their judgment, and it had cost them everything. Grant knew he had to avoid the same fate. The mansion, the book, the knowledge, it was all a test, a challenge that he could not afford to fail. With Scout by his side, he took a deep breath and began walking through the mansion. The floors creaked under his weight, the old beams groaning as if waking from a long slumber. Each room he passed seemed to hold a memory, a fragment of the past that had been lost to time. He could almost hear the echoes of laughter, the sounds of life that had once filled these walls. The mansion was a ghost of its former self, but Grant knew that it could be something more. He wasn't just restoring a house. He was bringing a piece of history back to life. And in doing so, he was forging his own future. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the mansion's ruins, and Grant knew that the next steps he took would be the most important of his life. As he continued his journey, he felt the presence of those who had come before him, guiding him, urging him to make the right choices. He thought about the treasure that had been hidden in the mansion, about the knowledge that could change the world. But as he walked deeper into the house, Grant knew that the true treasure was not the artifact or the legacy. It was the lessons he had learned along the way. The mansion had tested him, and it would continue to do so, but he was ready. He was ready to face the future, armed with the wisdom of the past, and to restore not just the Mercer name, but the hope that had been lost for so long. As Grant stood in the heart of the mansion, surrounded by the ghosts of the past, he felt something stir inside him, a sense of purpose that he had never known before. This was his moment. The journey had only just begun, and he was ready to walk the path that would lead him to his destiny. The days that followed were filled with work, but also with reflection. Grant spent his mornings walking through the mansion, familiarizing himself with the rooms that still stood strong, and the ones that had been ravaged by time and fire. The weight of the legacy he had uncovered was heavy on his shoulders, but it also gave him a sense of purpose. This house, this estate, wasn't just a place to live. It was the heart of a family's history, and it was up to him to restore it. As he worked, Grant thought about the lessons he had learned from the book, from the Mercer family's rise and fall. The power they had once held, the ambition that had driven them to make choices that led to their downfall. It all seemed like a warning. He wasn't just rebuilding the mansion, he was rebuilding a legacy. But what kind of legacy would he leave behind? The house felt alive, almost as if it was watching him, waiting for him to make his mark. The key that had unlocked the hidden chamber, the treasure that had been uncovered, all of it pointed to one thing. The Mercer family's secret was now his responsibility. It was more than just a physical structure to restore, it was a test of character. As the weeks passed, Grant began to understand that this mansion wasn't just a collection of walls and floors. It was a symbol of resilience, of strength. Even in the face of destruction, it had survived. And in its survival, it had something to offer him. Not just answers, but the opportunity to heal. For so long, Grant had carried the weight of his past, the scars of his time as a soldier, the loss of his comrades, the pain of returning home to find himself lost. The mansion, in some strange way, mirrored his own journey. Both had been broken, both had suffered, but both had the potential to heal. One afternoon, as he was working in the main hall, Grant heard a knock at the door. It was a sound he had grown unaccustomed to, and for a moment, he stood still, unsure of whether to answer. But curiosity got the best of him. He wiped his hands on his jeans and made his way to the door. As he opened it, he was surprised to see an older woman standing on the porch. She was dressed in a simple coat, her hair graying at the temples, but there was something about her eyes, a sense of familiarity, as if she had seen this house before. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said, her voice soft but warm. "I used to live here a long time ago. I was hoping to speak with the owner." Grant's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't expected anyone to remember this place, let alone someone who had once called it home. "I'm Grant Mercer," he said, introducing himself. "I've recently taken over the property." The woman's eyes widened, and for a moment, she seemed lost in thought. "Mercer, you say?" she murmured, almost to herself. "I knew your family, many years ago. Your grandfather was a good man. I'm Sarah Blackwell." Grant stepped back, motioning for her to come inside. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Blackwell. Please, come in." As she entered the house, she looked around, her gaze lingering on the walls and the staircase. It was clear she had a deep connection to the mansion. "I haven't been here in over 40 years, she said softly. "It's changed, of course, but some things still feel the same." Grant offered her a seat by the fire and sat down across from her. They spoke for hours, Sarah telling him stories of her time growing up in the mansion, of the Mercer family and the people who had lived here long before the fire. She spoke of the family's strength, their kindness, and the love that had once filled the house. But she also spoke of the darker days, of the ambition that had slowly poisoned the family's heart, and of the mistakes that had led to the house's downfall. "Your grandfather," Sarah said, her voice quiet, "was a man of honor. But he was also a man who believed that power could fix everything. The family was blessed with wealth, but we forgot that wealth isn't just about money. It's about love, loyalty, and responsibility." Grant listened intently, feeling a connection to the stories she shared. He knew that his grandfather's choices, the choices of the Mercer family, had shaped the man he was becoming. The mansion had stood through it all, and now it was his turn to decide what kind of legacy he would leave behind. As the evening wore on, Sarah stood to leave. "I'm glad to see someone in the family taking responsibility for this place," she said, smiling at him warmly. "But remember, Grant, it's not just about restoring the house. It's about restoring the heart of the family. That's the true treasure." With that, she left, disappearing into the night. Grant stood in the doorway, watching her walk away, the weight of her words settling deep within him. He realized she was right. The mansion, the family legacy, it wasn't just about the bricks and mortar. It was about the people, the love, the connections that had once defined the Mercer name. It was time to rebuild not just the house, but the heart of the family. The future, Grant knew, depended on it. Grant stood by the door, watching Sarah disappear into the evening mist. Her words echoed in his mind. Asterisk, it's not just about restoring the house. It's about restoring the heart of the family. Asterisk, the weight of her advice settled heavily on him. As he turned back into the mansion, the fire crackling in the hearth illuminated the dusty rooms that had once been filled with laughter and love, now silent and still. He could almost feel the presence of his ancestors, their hopes and dreams lingering in the air. The mansion had stood the test of time, but it wasn't just the structure that needed rebuilding. It was the heart of the Mercer family. The legacy wasn't just about material wealth. It was about values, loyalty, and love, as Sarah had said. As Grant walked through the grand hallway, he thought about what Sarah had shared with him. His grandfather, a man of honor, but one whose ambition had ultimately led to his downfall. The power, the wealth, it all came with a cost. And now, as the last living Mercer, Grant had the responsibility to not just restore the house, but to correct the mistakes of the past. The future of the Mercer family lay in his hands, and he couldn't afford to fail. Over the next few weeks, Grant worked tirelessly on the mansion. He carefully restored the rooms, paying attention to every detail, and began to clear away the overgrown gardens outside. But despite the physical work, his mind kept returning to Sarah's words. He realized that the mansion wasn't just a project. It was a symbol of redemption. It was about healing the wounds that had been left behind, about restoring what had been lost. One afternoon, as Grant was working in the library, he found an old chest hidden behind a row of dusty books. It was similar to the chest he had opened in the hidden chamber, but this one was smaller and covered in cobwebs. His curiosity piqued. He gently pried it open. Inside, he found more letters, more records of the Mercer family's history, including a letter from his grandfather to his father. As Grant read the letter, he was struck by the depth of the emotions it conveyed. It was a letter of regret, of a man realizing too late the importance of family over wealth. His grandfather wrote of the sacrifices he had made in pursuit of power, of the distance that had grown between him and his loved ones. Grant's heart ached as he read those words. He had always known that the Mercer family had a complicated history, but seeing his grandfather's remorse made the weight of the past feel all the more real. It was a stark reminder that power and ambition could cloud one's judgment, causing irreparable damage to those who mattered most. But the letter also contained a message of hope. His grandfather spoke of his hopes for the future, for a day when the family could rebuild, when they could learn from their mistakes and live a life centered around love and integrity. The letter ended with a plea for forgiveness. "I hope," the letter read, "that whoever finds this will understand that our true wealth lies not in the things we own, but in the people we love and the lives we build together. I failed in this, but I hope that one day my descendants will restore the Mercer name, not with gold or silver, but with honor and grace." Grant folded the letter carefully, the words sinking deep into his heart. He understood now. The legacy was not about repairing the past, but about moving forward, about making the right choices for the future. The mansion, the treasure, the power, it was all part of the story. But the true measure of success would come from how he lived, how he treated the people around him, and the values he chose to embrace. That night, Grant stood in the center of the grand hall, the mansion around him now taking shape in a way it never had before. It wasn't just about restoring a house. It was about building something meaningful, something that would last for generations to come. He knew there would be challenges ahead. The power contained in the Mercer family's legacy was great, and it could easily corrupt if it wasn't handled with care. But Grant was ready to face whatever came his way. He would not repeat the mistakes of the past. The Mercer name would not be a symbol of greed and ambition, but one of integrity, loyalty, and love. As he stood there, the weight of the key in his pocket reminded him of the responsibility he carried. But it also reminded him that the key wasn't just to the mansion. It was to the future, to the chance to make things right. And with that thought, Grant knew that no matter what happened, he would rebuild the Mercer legacy, not just for himself, but for the generations that would come after him. Grant woke early the next morning, the light of the new day casting soft shadows on the walls of the mansion. He had spent the last few weeks immersed in the task of restoration, but now, as he stood in the heart of the house, he realized that it was more than just a physical transformation. The house had begun to heal, and so had he. The weight of his family's past had burdened him, but now he understood that the legacy he carried was not one of doom, but of opportunity. As he walked through the grand hall, his mind was still heavy with the thoughts of his grandfather's letter and Sarah Blackwell's words. He had always believed that restoring the mansion would restore the Mercer name, but now he understood that it was more than that. It wasn't about simply fixing broken walls and ceilings. It was about building something new, something that would define the future. The sun had just begun to rise over the hills, and Grant could feel the cool breeze coming through the open windows, carrying with it a sense of peace that he hadn't felt in a long time. As he moved through the house, he couldn't help but notice the progress. The grand staircase that had once been crumbling now gleamed with fresh woodwork, and the garden outside, though still in the early stages of recovery, was beginning to show signs of life. The house was no longer a forgotten relic of the past. It was becoming a home again. But Grant knew that his work was far from over. The mansion had been a symbol of his family's rise to power, but it had also been a symbol of their downfall. It was time to rebuild not only the house, but also the heart of the family. That evening, Grant decided to invite the townspeople to the mansion. He knew that it wasn't just the house that needed healing, but the community as well. He had spent so much time focusing on restoring the mansion that he had neglected the people who had once been connected to it. Now, he understood that the mansion's revival was tied to the revival of the town. As the townspeople gathered, Grant stood at the front of the great hall, surrounded by people who had once looked at the mansion with skepticism, but now, they looked at it with hope. He greeted them warmly, his heart full of gratitude. He had never realized how much this place meant to them, but now, standing in front of them, he felt a deep sense of responsibility to not just restore the mansion, but to give it back to the community. This house, this land, belongs to all of us, he said, his voice steady and strong. The Mercer family built this place, but it is not just their legacy. It is ours now, and together, we will restore it, not just as a house, but as a place where we can come together, a place that reflects the values of love, loyalty, and honor that we hold dear. The crowd fell silent, listening intently. Grant could see the hope in their eyes, the belief that this house, this home, could once again be a place of unity. After he spoke, the townspeople began to move throughout the mansion, admiring the work that had been done and offering their help. Some of them had lived in the town all their lives, and they shared stories of the mansion's past, stories that had been forgotten by many. As they worked together, Grant realized that this was the key to healing. It wasn't about fixing the house alone. It was about coming together as a community, about restoring what had been broken not just in the walls, but in the hearts of the people who had once lived and worked there. Days turned into weeks, and with each passing day, the mansion began to transform, but more importantly, so did the people. The bond between Grant and the townspeople grew stronger, and as the mansion's restoration progressed, so did the town's sense of unity. The house became a symbol of hope and rebirth, and Grant realized that this wasn't just about redeeming the Mercer name. It was about something much greater. He had come to restore a house, but in the process, he had restored a community. One evening, as Grant stood on the balcony overlooking the now-blooming garden, he felt a sense of peace settle over him. The mansion was no longer just a reminder of the past. It was a living, breathing part of the future. The legacy of the Mercer family had been rewritten, not with power or wealth, but with love and community. He thought of the journey that had brought him here, the challenges he had faced, and the choices he had made. There had been moments of doubt, but now, standing in the heart of the mansion, he knew that he had made the right choice. The mansion, once abandoned and forgotten, was now a symbol of hope, not just for the Mercer family, but for the entire town. It was a place where people could come together, share their stories, and rebuild what had been lost. Grant knew that his work was far from over, but he also knew that the mansion was no longer just a project. It was a new beginning. As the sun set behind the hills, Grant felt a sense of peace settle in his chest. The mansion had been restored, but so had he. The legacy of the Mercer family was no longer a burden but a gift, and he was ready to face the future with a heart full of hope. Months passed, and the transformation of both the mansion and the town continued. Grant could feel the shift in the air. It was as though the house was slowly breathing again, coming to life with every brushstroke, every nail hammered in place. But more importantly, he felt a change in himself, in the way he saw the world. The burden of his family's past had lifted, replaced by a new sense of purpose. The mansion was no longer just a physical structure. It was a home, a symbol of redemption for both him and the town. People from all walks of life came together to help restore it. The local craftsmen and tradespeople, once skeptical of the Mercer family's intentions, now worked side by side with Grant. The mansion had become a place of healing for the entire town. Grant knew that the project wasn't just about restoring the building. It was about reuniting a community that had been fractured for so long. The more the town worked together, the more it seemed as if old divisions were vanishing, replaced by new bonds. One crisp autumn afternoon, as Grant was inspecting the work done on the second-floor balcony, a familiar figure appeared at the front gate. It was Sarah Blackwell, the woman who had shared her stories of the past, offering wisdom and guidance. She had been away for a while, but now, she had returned to see the progress for herself. Grant made his way down the steps to greet her. Her eyes sparkled as she took in the sight of the mansion, now nearly complete. The grand hallways had been restored. The once crumbling garden now flourished with vibrant flowers and shrubs. The house no longer looked like the forgotten relic of a bygone era. It looked like a place where people could gather, share stories, and build memories. "You've done it, Grant," Sarah said softly, her voice full of admiration. "You've brought it back." Grant smiled, though his heart was heavy with the knowledge that the mansion's true restoration would never be complete until the lessons of the past were fully embraced. "It's not just me, Sarah," he replied. "It's the whole town. Everyone's come together to make this happen." Sarah nodded, her eyes scanning the grounds. "This house holds many stories, both beautiful and painful, but it's clear now that it will carry the weight of its history and the hope of its future." She paused for a moment, her gaze softening. "The Mercer family and this house have been given a second chance. But it's up to you, Grant, to make sure that it stays true to what you've learned. The power, the wealth, it doesn't matter. What matters is the heart. It's the love you put into this place, and the love you give to others, that will truly restore its legacy." Grant nodded, his chest swelling with gratitude. He knew that Sarah was right. The mansion had been the symbol of his family's rise and fall, but now it was a symbol of new beginnings. It had the potential to become something far greater than a mere inheritance. It could be a place of community, a place of healing, a place where love and loyalty could thrive. As Sarah walked with him through the mansion, they paused in the library, where the book he had discovered lay open on the table. The words inside it, the story of his family's past, were a powerful reminder of how far they had come, and how far they still had to go. "This is where it all began," Grant said, running his fingers over the pages. "But it's also where it all ends. We can't change the past, but we can shape the future." Sarah's eyes glistened as she looked at him. "And you will, Grant. You already have." As they continued to walk through the house, Grant felt a deep sense of peace settle in his heart. He knew that this was just the beginning. The mansion, the town, his family, they had all been given a second chance. And now, it was up to him to honor that gift, to continue the work that had started with his grandfather and make sure it never lost its way again. The future was unwritten, but it was no longer a burden. It was a possibility, full of hope and promise. And Grant knew, with the support of the town, the legacy of the Mercer family would not only survive, it would thrive. The mansion, once a symbol of loss and ruin, was now a beacon of hope for the future. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the house, Grant felt a new sense of belonging. He was no longer haunted by the past. He had made peace with it, and now he could move forward, hand in hand with the community he had helped rebuild, toward a future full of promise. As the seasons shifted and the town began to flourish under the careful restoration of the mansion, Grant stood at the edge of the estate, looking out over the grounds. The hard work, the late nights, and the endless hours of labor had paid off. The mansion, once a symbol of the Mercer family's downfall, had been reborn, but it was more than just a house now. It was a living, breathing testament to the resilience of a community and a family that had refused to be defined by their past mistakes. Over the months, the house had become a gathering place for the town. It wasn't just a place where people worked to restore the walls and the gardens. It had become the heart of the town, where people gathered for community events, shared meals, and found solace in each other's company. The Mercer family's name, once synonymous with loss and greed, had been reclaimed, but not in the way Grant had initially expected. It was not by wealth or power, but through love, unity, and the strength to learn from the past. As the final touches were added to the mansion, the people of the town worked together to bring it to life in ways Grant had never imagined. The library, once dusty and forgotten, now sparkled with books that told stories not just of the Mercer family, but of the town's history, its triumphs, and its challenges. The gardens were vibrant, with flowers in full bloom and the scent of the earth filling the air. Grant could feel his grandfather's presence in the house, a silent approval, as if his spirit was now at peace. He had done it. He had restored the family legacy, but more importantly, he had restored the sense of community that had been lost. The work was never truly finished, Grant knew. There would always be more to do, more to learn, and more to give. But as he stood there, watching the sun dip below the horizon, he felt the weight of the past lift from his shoulders. It was a new day, not just for the mansion, but for him and for everyone who had helped him rebuild it. The mansion was no longer a reminder of the mistakes of the past, but a beacon of what could be achieved when people came together. Grant's journey had started with the restoration of a house, but it had grown into something much greater. It was about healing, about accepting the past without letting it control the future, and about using the lessons of history to build something better. He thought of Sarah Blackwell's words, "The legacy of the Mercer family isn't in the house or the wealth. It's in the love and the choices you make." And now, he understood. The house was a symbol, yes, but it was the people, the relationships, and the connections they had rebuilt that would last for generations. He had come to terms with his own demons, with the legacy of his family, and had created something new, something better. The mansion had become a home once more. The legacy of the Mercer family was no longer a curse to be avoided or a weight to be carried. It was a story of redemption, of second chances, and of hope for the future. The light of the setting sun glinted off the restored windows of the mansion, and for the first time in a long while, Grant felt truly at peace. He had found the home he had been searching for all along, not in the walls or the wealth, but in the people who had helped him build it. As the town gathered that evening for the grand opening of the mansion's new chapter, Grant stood at the center, Scout by his side. He looked out over the crowd, the people who had supported him through this journey, and smiled. The house was filled with laughter and warmth, a true reflection of the new legacy he had forged. This was the end of one chapter and the beginning of another, not just for him, but for the entire town. The Mercer family had been given a second chance, not by the power of wealth, but by the strength of the bonds they had created, the lessons they had learned, and the love they had chosen to give. Grant knew that, in the end, that was the greatest treasure of all. This powerful tale follows a veteran as he restores a burned mansion that holds the key to his family's past, weaving a story of redemption, community, and second chances. As a veteran struggles with his family's legacy, he discovers not only the secrets of an old mansion, but also the weight of history that has shaped his future. With the help of the town, the veteran embarks on a journey to rebuild the mansion and his own life. The mansion, once a symbol of loss, becomes a beacon of hope for the veteran and the people who come together to restore it. As the restoration unfolds, we learn that the true treasure is not in wealth, but in the lessons learned and the bonds formed. Through this journey, the veteran faces his own demons and finds redemption in the very place that once symbolized his family's downfall. This is more than just a house being rebuilt. It is a story of healing, of discovering strength through adversity, and of the power of community. With his loyal dog by his side, the veteran takes on the task of restoring not just the mansion, but his own sense of self-worth. In this moving narrative, we see that sometimes the greatest challenges are the ones that shape us the most. This is a story of perseverance, of finding hope in the darkest of places, and of the transformative power of rebuilding both a home and a family's legacy. Veteran stories like this remind us of the power of the human spirit to heal, rebuild, and find purpose, even in the face of overwhelming odds. Through determination and support, the veteran and his community create a new chapter, making this journey not only one of personal growth, but also of collective renewal.